Hello and welcome to Into the Unknown. In this episode I'm going to relate to you about the Battle of Los Angeles from 1942. And keep listening at the end because I'm going to be playing you the original news broadcast from 1942. During the early morning hours of February the 25th, 1942, 2 million Americans in the vicinity of Los Angeles, California, had their sleep interrupted by the sound of air raid sirens and anti-aircraft fire. Those who tiredly looked out of their windows or went outside to see what the commotion was were rewarded with a light show that turned the night into day. Thousands of US Army anti-aircraft searchlights flooded the skies with searching beams looking for attacking enemy aircraft. The lights crisscrossed the blackness of the night sky, hoping to disclose and pinpoint the enemy. It was only weeks after the surprise Japanese attack on Pearl Harbour. The country wasn't prepared for another sneak enemy attack, as the events of this February morning would reveal. Air raid wardens stopped cars in the streets and insisted lights be turned off, and at home window shades be drawn. The neighbourhoods and streets were now darkened, preventing any enemy a lit target to spot from overhead. Above the city, a glowing object was silently moving slowly through the skies as the anti-aircraft batteries focused their spotlights and began to take aim. Katie, a young woman who had volunteered to be an air raid warden, received a phone call from her district supervisor. The supervisor notified her of the alert and then asked if she had seen an object in the sky that was very close to her home. Without hesitation, she went to the window and looked into the sky. It was huge, it was enormous, and it was practically right over my house. I had never seen anything like it in my life, she said. It was just hovering there in the sky and hardly moving at all. It was a lovely pale orange and about the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I could see it perfectly because it was very close. It was big. Katie added that the anti-aircraft searchlights had completely surrounded the object. They sent fighter planes up, and I watched them in groups approach it and then turn away. They were shooting at it, but it didn't seem to matter. Katie states that US fighter planes did attack the object. It was like the 4th of July, but much louder. They were firing like crazy, but they couldn't touch it. I'll never forget what a magnificent sight it was, just marvellous, and what a gorgeous colour, said Katie. With the lights off, the city's residents were now able to witness what was to be known as the Battle of Los Angeles. It was a scene to be often depicted in future Hollywood science fiction movies. Scenes from George Powell's 1953 movie The War of the Worlds would seem eerily familiar as US military personnel bombard the space invaders with hundreds of artillery shells bathed in brilliant light from an array of searchlights. The 37th Coast Artillery Brigade's anti-aircraft batteries began firing at 3:08 a.m. and ceased at 4:14 a.m. In total, nearly 2,000 12.8-pound artillery shells were fired into the night sky at an undisclosed and seemingly indestructible object. The all-clear siren was heard at 7:21 a.m. and the inhabitants of Los Angeles greeted the siren with a sigh of relief. They'd survived. The question that's still unanswered to this day is who or what had attacked. Newspaper reports were scarce. Government and military officials often gave conflicting statements to the press. Local resident witnesses were not interviewed or the information they gave not deemed credible by the news agencies. The only mention of the event in the Los Angeles Times was a brief article of page 1 which started with the headline, "Chilly Throng Watches Shells Bursting in Sky." The article, written by Marvin Miles, went on to describe explosions stabbing the darkness like tiny bursting stars and searchlight beams poking long, criss-cross fingers across the night sky, and so on. Yet the article didn't mention an unknown object or enemy planes. Initial reports cited witnesses seeing formations of warplanes overhead resulting in dogfights between enemy and US fighter planes, and still others reporting seeing flares falling from the sky. A naval intelligence warning indicated an attack was expected within the next 10 hours. Various radar stations picking up unidentified objects 120 miles west of Los Angeles. Immediately following the blackout, the information centre was inundated with phone calls from patriotic citizens reporting enemy planes in the sky. A Coast Artillery colonel spotted 25 planes at 12,000 feet over Los Angeles, and others saw a balloon carrying red flares hovering over Santa Monica. The military categorically stated that no US aircraft were in the air. and stories of dogfights were being misreported. Officials explained that because of its limited number of aerial assets, the Air Force planes had remained grounded until identified enemy planes could be located and then verified. The Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, announced at a February 25th press conference that there was no evidence of any enemy planes and that the raid was simply a false alarm. And finally, the Army issued the War Department report, which indicated that between 1 and 5 unidentified objects had flown over Los Angeles and that these objects were believed to be Japanese. It's interesting to note at the conclusion of World War II, the Japanese claimed that they did not send any aircraft nor attack Los Angeles or Southern California in February 1942. Non-military witnesses, some using binoculars, describe a large orange object that moved slowly over the coast between Santa Monica and Long Beach. The object travelled a 20 miles distance in approximately 30 minutes and then simply disappeared. An employee of the Los Angeles Herald-Express said that he was certain many of the artillery shells had hit their target but had had no effect. Recently, a gentleman from Texas, a comedian no less, claims to have a possible explanation for the event. He states that he's in contact with a member of a race of beings commonly referred to as the Greys. These creatures are approximately 4 feet 4 inches tall, grey in colour, have large almond-shaped eyes, small nose and mouth, and have a slight frame, and that they've been portrayed in Hollywood films, including Close Encounters of the Third Kind. These beings say they originated on Earth some 300,000 years ago. They describe this time as before Adam. They insist they are terrestrial, of the Earth, and take exception to being called extraterrestrial. They claim responsibility for the majority of UFO sightings as they are constantly monitoring this planet. According to them, it was one of their ships that was the cause of the excitement on the morning of February the 25th, 1942. They state that the Civil Defence fired at least 1,000 anti-aircraft rounds, but that their craft was undamaged. So, is it possible that after all this time, the mystery of the Battle of Los Angeles has finally been solved? But one could speculate as to why the UFO was floating over the greater Los Angeles area, or even more so, why its occupants would approach a stand-up comedian to tell their tale.
The news of the world, Wednesday, February 25th. Once again, Columbia's correspondents in world capitals and in the fighting zones in the Western Pacific are ready to give you the latest news direct by shortwave radio.
And now for news of our own West Coast, we take you to Los Angeles and the report of Byron Palmer.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark skies, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action. Although some watchers say they saw airplanes in the air, semi-official sources say they probably were the U.S. Army's pursuit. Several observers say they saw one or more planes spotlighted by 20 or 30 searchlights. The object moved southward, presumably over Huntington Park at the western edge of Los Angeles, and on southward to about Long Beach on the coast. By 3:30 a.m., observers said the object appeared to be over the south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their glare. Shells frequently could be seen bursting near the object, but none appeared to hit it. The shooting stopped about 3:30 a.m. The shooting brought warfare to the front door of this city of 1.25 million population for the first time since December 7th. Already it was alert to the presence off the Southern California coast of a Japanese submarine which had pumped 25 shells into an oil field north of Santa Barbara Monday evening. Because of the presence of the submarine, a 3-hour alert was ordered at dusk last night, and civilian authorities stood at their posts while the Army and Navy continued their search for the submersible. The evening alert ended at 10:23 p.m., but another was sounded at 2:22 a.m., and the blackout followed within 3 minutes. It covered Los Angeles County from Santa Monica to Pomona. At 2:27, all Southern California radio stations were ordered off the air, except those in San Diego. Approximately 20 minutes after the firing died down, the ship returned and headed westward from Long Beach toward Santa Monica. The guns went into action again, hurling round after round of shells at the object. The second barrage appeared to be closer to downtown Los Angeles, since watchers could hear the concussion of the guns more clearly, and the flash of bursting shells was brighter. Then the ship disappeared for the second time over the ocean. We return you now to CBS in New York.